The amber glow of a lone street lamp, battling against the encroaching gloom, cut through the perpetual Baltimore drizzle, reflecting in the rain-slicked asphalt of a quiet residential street in Federal Hill. It was a Tuesday, February 15, 1994, and Detective Arthur Pendelton was already awake, the muted, rhythmic hum of the city, a symphony of distant traffic and industrial echoes, his constant alarm. At 42, Arthur possessed the weary lines around his eyes that spoke of too many late nights spent poring over case files, too many grim sights witnessed in the city's forgotten corners, yet his profound resolve remained unbent. He moved through his pre-dawn ritual with practiced, almost ritualistic efficiency, coffee brewing, its robust aroma filling the small kitchen, newspaper rustling with headlines of local crime and national politics, the faint, comforting smell of toast already clinging to the air. His wife, Sarah, a vibrant woman of 40 whose infectious laughter had always been the perfect antidote to his inherent solemnity, was still asleep, curled beneath a cherished, handmade patchwork quilt, blissfully oblivious to the heavy, chilling burden he carried in his thoughts. Their house, a sturdy, red-brick row home with a white marble stoop, meticulously cared for amidst the historic charm of the neighborhood, felt like a sacred sanctuary. Inside, it was filled with the tangible markers of a life truly well lived, a testament to family and love. Brightly colored children's drawings, now slightly faded, still proudly tacked to the refrigerator, a dog-eared worn copy of Moby Dick on his bedside table, its spine cracked from countless readings, and the delicate, lingering scent of Sarah's favorite gardenia perfume. Upstairs, his children, Emily, a thoughtful 15-year-old on the cusp of womanhood, and Daniel, a boisterous 12-year-old with an endless supply of energy, slumbered, their teenage dreams and preteen anxieties far removed from the shadowed, often brutal world their father navigated daily. Arthur was, by all accounts, a good father, present, patient, and unwavering, despite the relentless demands of his demanding job. He coached Daniel's little league team whenever his schedule permitted, helped Emily with her challenging algebra homework, and always, without fail, made time for family dinners, even if they often started after 8 p.m., the conversation a comforting balm after a day immersed in the city's darker narratives. Arthur worked for the Baltimore Police Department, specifically in the Homicide Division, a unit that saw the absolute worst humanity had to offer. His reputation among his peers was solid, built not on showmanship but on painstaking dedication, an almost obsessive attention to detail, and a quiet, almost unsettling ability to connect disparate, seemingly unrelated pieces of a complex puzzle. He wasn't flashy, he was simply, unequivocally, relentless. For the past 6 months, he'd been completely immersed in a complex, high-stakes drug trafficking case. It involved a vast network, far more sophisticated and entrenched than the typical street-level dealers his precinct usually handled, its tendrils reaching deep into the city's forgotten industrial zones, its labyrinthine abandoned warehouses, and far more disturbingly, whispers suggested, into the very fabric of the city's institutions. There was a rat, someone highly placed within the city's protective layers, leaking critical information, actively protecting the illicit operation. Arthur felt it in his bones, a cold, pervasive dread that lingered even in the false warmth of his own home. That particular morning, the chill in the raw February air seemed to seep into his bones, deeper than usual, a premonition perhaps. He leaned over Sarah, kissing her forehead, a soft, lingering touch that conveyed years of unspoken affection. "Morning, sleepyhead," he murmured, her eyelids fluttering briefly, a fleeting smile gracing her lips before she settled back into slumber, blissfully unaware of the unspoken farewell in his touch. He left a hastily scribbled note for the kids on the kitchen counter, illuminated by the refrigerator's faint glow. "Breakfast is on the stove. Have a good day." "Love, Dad." He grabbed his worn, familiar leather satchel, its surface smooth from years of use, his police badge gleaming faintly beneath the lapel of his heavy wool coat, and stepped out into the pre-dawn gloom, the rhythmic drip of water from the eaves echoing the uneasy beat of his own heart. His unmarked patrol car, a sturdy Ford Crown Victoria, the standard issue for detectives of the era, hummed to life as he turned the key, its engine a familiar rumble. The police radio, a constant companion, crackled with mundane dispatches, a domestic disturbance in the tight-knit row houses of Pigtown, a minor fender bender on the bustling Jones Falls Expressway. Arthur, however, was focused intently on something else, his mind already miles ahead. He was scheduled to meet an informant later that evening, off the books, in a covert operation he hadn't fully disclosed even to Sergeant Miller. The informant was a man named Marcus Silas Thorne, a mid-level player in the drug hierarchy, now scared but desperate enough to talk, promising intel that could blow the entire sprawling drug operation wide open. The rendezvous point was an old, abandoned cannery near the Patapsco River, a skeletal relic of Baltimore's once thriving industrial past, now shrouded in perpetual shadow and the lingering, acrid stench of decay and neglect. It was a place where secrets went to die, and sometimes those who held them. The day proceeded with an unnerving normality for Sarah. She taught English literature at Patterson High School, a job she deeply loved, finding solace and purpose in instilling in her students a passion for words and stories, for critical thought. Emily attended Western High, absorbed in her studies, her head filled with nascent dreams of college and a future far from the city's harder edges. Daniel navigated the daily trials of middle school, his main concerns being challenging homework assignments and the eagerly anticipated start of the upcoming baseball season. Sarah called Arthur's desk phone around lunchtime, as she often did, just to check in, a small ritual of connection. It rang unanswered, the automated voice of the police switchboard the only reply. She left a brief voicemail, a casual "Hey, just checking in, call me back when you get a chance." She thought nothing of it. Arthur was, after all, a busy man. By 6 p.m., with the children home, their laughter echoing through the house and the comforting aroma of dinner cooking on the stove, Sarah tried again. Still no answer. A faint, insidious knot of unease began to form in her stomach. Arthur was usually meticulous about returning calls, especially when she knew he wasn't out on an active, life-threatening scene. She tried his pager, punching in their home number. No response. The knot tightened, transforming into a cold, hard lump of dread. She tried again at 8 p.m., then 9 p.m. By 10 p.m., the children were long asleep, their peaceful breathing a stark contrast to Sarah's escalating turmoil, and she was pacing the living room, the quiet, empty house amplifying her growing anxiety. Arthur had never just not come home, not without a call, not once in 17 years of devoted marriage. The pattern was broken. She called his precinct directly, her voice trembling slightly, betraying her fear. Sergeant Miller, a gruff but kind officer, a veteran who had worked alongside Arthur for years, answered, his voice gravelly from a long shift. "Pendelton, nah, Sarah, he left around 5. Said he had a lead to follow up on, something confidential. Off book, you know how he gets," Miller recounted, recalling Arthur's final words. Sarah's heart sank, a cold stone dropping into a bottomless well. Off book, that was Arthur's dangerous habit, his relentless, almost monomaniacal pursuit of justice, often blurring the lines of established protocol, pushing him into solitary, dangerous corners. She explained that he hadn't come home, that the children were worried, that she was terrified. Miller tried his pager, then Arthur's wife's mobile number, a relatively new device for her, kept mostly for emergencies, then their home line. "No luck, don't worry, Sarah," he tried to reassure her, his tone betraying his own significant concern, a tremor of doubt in his voice. "He's probably just tied up. We'll send a couple of units to check his usual haunts, see if his car's around. He'll turn up." But the promise felt hollow, even to him. The first palpable signs of real alarm came with the harsh, gray light of dawn the following morning. Arthur's Ford Crown Victoria was nowhere to be found. His colleagues, now officially alerted and deeply worried for one of their own, scoured his usual routes, the precinct's secure parking lot, the labyrinthine neighborhoods surrounding the cannery. Nothing, the city, vast and indifferent, a sprawling beast of brick and concrete, seemed to have simply swallowed up a man without a trace. By Wednesday afternoon, the search escalated dramatically. Baltimore PD activated a citywide bulletin, their resources stretched thin but focused on this unprecedented event. Missing persons posters, stark black and white, featuring Arthur's kind but serious face, now appeared like grim sentinels in coffee shops, on lamp posts, and in the windows of corner stores across the city, their edges already curling in the damp air. The local media picked up the story with a voracious appetite. Detective vanishes. It became a sensation, a chilling narrative of a dedicated lawman seemingly swallowed by the very mean streets he swore to protect. Sarah and the children were plunged into a terrifying, suffocating limbo. Every phone call, every unexpected knock on the door, sent a jolt of desperate, fleeting hope and crushing disappointment through them. Emily, once vivacious and outgoing, grew withdrawn, her cheerful disposition replaced by a profound, pervasive sadness, her laughter rarely heard. Daniel, confused and deeply scared by the sudden, inexplicable absence of his hero father, kept asking, his voice small and fragile, "When's Dad coming home, Mom?" "Is he okay?" Sarah, despite her own mounting, suffocating fear, had to be strong for them, a lone lighthouse in a gathering, relentless storm. She clung to the increasingly fragile hope that Arthur had simply gone deep undercover, that he would reemerge, perhaps battered but triumphant, with the information to crack the case wide open, to bring down the bad guys. But deep down, a colder, more insidious fear began to take root, a fear that gnawed at her waking thoughts and haunted her nightmares. The initial investigation was a whirlwind of frantic activity, a desperate scramble for answers, which then slowly, agonizingly, devolved into a frustrating, inconclusive grind. Detectives from Homicide, along with the often feared Internal Affairs Unit, converged on Arthur's sparse office and meticulously reviewed his case files, seeking any overlooked clue. They interviewed everyone. His worried colleagues, his various informants, even suspects he had put away years ago, hoping for an enemy who might boast. They checked his bank accounts, his phone records, limited and less detailed in 1994, but still scrutinized for anomalies, his medical history. Nothing. It was as if Detective Arthur Pendelton had simply ceased to exist, a ghost in the vast, indifferent machine of the city. The limited technology of the era, without widespread CCTV or sophisticated digital forensics, meant investigators relied heavily on shoe leather and witness accounts, both of which proved frustratingly sparse. Then, a week after Arthur's baffling disappearance, a body was discovered in a squalid, abandoned apartment in West Baltimore, a notorious haven for drug activity. It was Marcus Silas Thorne, Arthur's informant, the very man he was scheduled to meet. The official cause of death was ruled a heroin overdose, but the circumstances were immediately suspicious. No signs of forced entry, but the apartment had been eerily cleaned, stripped of anything that could provide a clue, a chillingly professional touch. Arthur's colleagues, especially Sergeant Miller, who had known Arthur's deep personal investment in the case, immediately suspected a sinister connection. Silas had promised explosive information. Now he was dead. Had Arthur met the same fate, lured into a trap, the discovery of Silas's body only deepened the impenetrable mystery surrounding Arthur. Internal Affairs, ever wary of police misconduct, now began to investigate Arthur himself, their suspicions turning inward. Was he compromised? Was he, despite his impeccable record, somehow involved in the very drug ring he was so diligently investigating? The whispers, initially faint, grew louder, more insidious, tearing at Sarah's already frayed heart. Her husband, a man of unimpeachable integrity, a man who believed in the law and justice above all else, could not possibly be corrupt. She fought fiercely against the ugly insinuations, defending his honor to anyone who would listen, but the seeds of doubt, once planted by bureaucratic suspicion, were hard to dislodge, even for those who knew Arthur best. The institution, in its fear of scandal, seemed to turn on its own. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months, each passing moment a fresh wound. The official search tapered off, the bulletins growing less frequent, the once frenzied media attention slowly fading, moving on to new tragedies. The case was quietly reclassified as missing person, presumed dead, then, inevitably, settled into the grim archives as a cold case, a folder gathering dust. The Ford Crown Victoria was finally found 3 weeks after Arthur vanished, abandoned in a desolate, forgotten corner of an industrial park in Sparrows Point, a good 20 miles east of the cannery where he was supposed to meet Silas. Keys still in the ignition, passenger door ajar, no fingerprints of note, no signs of a struggle, nothing to suggest what had happened. It was a chillingly clean disappearance, almost impossibly professional, leaving behind only questions and a profound, aching void. The Pendelton family's life became a testament to enduring, agonizing grief. Sarah, resilient as she was, carried the colossal weight of Arthur's absence like a perpetual shroud. She struggled financially, even with the police pension, but far more profoundly, she struggled emotionally, trying to navigate a world that felt fundamentally altered without her anchor, her partner. Emily, once a vivacious, chatty girl, became quieter, seeking solace in the solitary worlds of books and art, her dreams of college now shadowed by the unspoken, crushing fear of leaving her mother alone. Daniel, now a confused and increasingly angry teenager, channeled his raw emotions into sports, becoming fiercely competitive, perhaps hoping to outrun the pain that gnawed at his young soul. Every holiday, every birthday, every small family milestone was a stark, agonizing reminder of the empty chair at their table, a ghost in their midst. Sarah never remarried, never truly moved on, her heart forever tethered to the man who vanished. She kept Arthur's photo on the mantel, his police uniform neatly pressed and stored in the closet, a defiant refusal to let him disappear entirely from their lives, a quiet act of remembrance. She even hired a private investigator a few years later, a retired detective named Frank Rossi, hoping for a fresh pair of eyes. But even he, with all his contacts and experience, eventually hit dead ends, echoing the official conclusion that Arthur had simply vanished without a trace, likely at the hands of those he was investigating, his body disposed of meticulously, permanently. The years rolled on, each one dulling the sharp, agonizing edges of grief but never truly erasing the gaping void. The Baltimore of 1994, with its raw, industrial edges and analog charm, slowly, irrevocably evolved. The millennium turned, bringing with it a wave of technological and social changes. Cell phones became ubiquitous, no longer a luxury but a daily necessity. The internet transformed from a niche academic tool to a daily presence in homes and businesses. The city skyline shifted, new gleaming developments rising where old, crumbling industries had once stood. For Sarah and her children, life became a series of quiet endurance, punctuated by the annual, increasingly hollow ritual of refiling a missing person report, a formality that felt less about hope and more about duty. Then, 12 years later, a twist of fate, a chance discovery that would shatter the long-held silence. It was April 2006. Spring had painted Baltimore in vibrant hues of verdant green and delicate cherry blossom pink, a fleeting beauty against the city's enduring grit. In the forgotten, overgrown industrial stretch along the Patapsco River, just south of the burgeoning neighborhood of Canton, a massive new urban redevelopment project was finally breaking ground. It was an ambitious, multi-million-dollar plan to transform a sprawling, dilapidated complex of old warehouses and manufacturing plants, derelict and abandoned since the economic downturns of the 1970s, into luxury condominiums and sleek retail spaces. The area, long a haven for squatters, urban explorers, and clandestine activities, was now alive with the incessant roar of heavy machinery, a new kind of urban symphony. Bulldozers tore through crumbling concrete foundations, excavators scooped up decades of accumulated rubble and compacted earth. On a particularly warm Tuesday morning, April 18th, a young construction worker named Kevin O'Malley, barely out of trade school, was operating a powerful backhoe, clearing a section of overgrown scrubland adjacent to the skeletal remains of what was once a grand textile mill. The ground there was unusually soft, yielding, despite years of compaction and neglect. As his bucket dug deeper into the earth, it scraped against something metallic, something large and cylindrical, producing a harsh, grating sound. He stopped the machine, his trained eye immediately recognizing the anomaly, his curiosity piqued by the unusual resistance. It was a heavily rusted, severely corroded industrial drum, the kind typically used for chemicals or hazardous waste, half buried beneath several feet of dark, undisturbed earth. It looked ancient, forgotten, a relic of an industrial past. Kevin, adhering strictly to site safety protocol, immediately called his foreman. The foreman, a grizzled veteran named Roy, who had spent decades in Baltimore's construction trenches, took one look at the drum, noting its unusual size and the crude, amateurish welds that had clearly been applied to seal it shut. "Looks like someone didn't want this opened," Roy mumbled, an old hand who'd seen enough strange and unsettling things buried in the city's underbelly to be immediately wary. This wasn't just discarded trash. They promptly called the police, the official channels now engaged. What followed was a meticulous, delicate excavation. Crime scene investigators, led by a seasoned, methodical detective named Alina Ramirez, arrived within the hour, their professionalism a stark contrast to the rough industrial setting. The drum was carefully, painstakingly lifted from the earth, its rusted surface flaking away like old skin, revealing remnants of heavy industrial-grade tarp and thick, corroded chains that had once bound it securely. The smell, initially faint, grew stronger as the seal was breached. The sickly sweet, undeniable odor of decay, even after all these years, permeated the morning air. With specialized tools, they managed to gingerly pry open the top of the drum, the rusted metal groaning in protest. Inside, amidst layers of decomposed tarp and a thick, dark slurry of earth and liquid, were human remains. Skeletal, yes, but remarkably well preserved due to the sealed, anaerobic environment within the drum. The scene was grim, disturbing, but Alina Ramirez, like Arthur Pendelton before her, had seen worse. As the crime scene technicians worked methodically, meticulously, carefully extracting the contents, they noticed something else. Tucked tightly against the remains, almost as if protected, wrapped in multiple layers of waterproof plastic sheeting and industrial-strength duct tape, was a small, oblong object. It was Arthur Pendelton's worn leather satchel, his personal effects still contained within. The satchel, remarkably, had protected its contents from the worst of the elements, a small miracle in itself. Inside, among a few deeply personal effects, a crumpled, faded photograph of Sarah and the children, a small, silver-engraved pen, a police-issued flashlight, was a meticulously kept, hardbound notebook, a journal. And it was unequivocally Arthur's. His name, inscribed in neat, resolute handwriting, was on the first page, a haunting confirmation. The Baltimore Police Department was notified, and the staggering news rippled through the precinct like an electric current, a ghostly echo from the past. Arthur Pendelton had been found. 12 years of agonizing silence, of unanswered questions, of gnawing uncertainty, broken by the simple clang of an excavator bucket against metal. Sarah Pendelton received the call from Alina Ramirez herself, a call she had simultaneously dreaded and prayed for over a decade, a call that would forever alter the trajectory of her life. The voice on the other end was gentle, apologetic, yet firm, delivering the impossible truth. "Mrs. Pendelton, we believe we have found Arthur." The world, for Sarah, tilted violently on its axis. Forensic odontologists, using advanced techniques available in 2006, quickly confirmed the identity through Arthur's meticulously kept dental records. It was Arthur. The subsequent autopsy revealed he had been shot once, at close range, in the back of the head, an execution-style killing. His body had then been placed in the drum, sealed with crude but effective welds, and buried in the forgotten earth. The professional, chillingly clean nature of his disappearance finally made terrible, brutal sense. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was targeted, premeditated. But the most critical piece of the puzzle, the profound, earth-shattering this that truly shattered the long-standing mystery and the accompanying institutional silence, was not the remains themselves, but the journal. Arthur's journal was not merely a notebook. It was a meticulous, detailed record of his final, most dangerous investigation. His handwritten notes, preserved through the years as if by a desperate will, detailed the inner workings of the extensive drug trafficking ring. He named names, local figures, shadowy connections. He described precise locations, drop-off points, safe houses. He documented transactions, dates, amounts, methods. And on the final, tear-stained pages, written with a frantic urgency just days before his disappearance, he wrote about his growing suspicion, his chilling certainty that there was a corrupt officer deeply involved, feeding critical information to the criminal organization, ensuring their continued immunity. He even, with a final, desperate act of courage, named that officer, Lieutenant Kenneth Harding, Lieutenant Harding. The name sent immediate, visceral shockwaves through the BPD. Harding was now a captain, a seemingly respected, even admired, figure within the department, a man who had outwardly supported the search for Arthur Pendelton for years, often publicly expressing his profound regret and sympathy for the grieving family. He had been a pallbearer at Arthur's emotional memorial service. He had even been part of the initial investigative team that had, with a frustrating lack of answers, declared Arthur's disappearance a cold case, quietly closing the file. The depth of the betrayal was staggering, an open wound for the entire department. Arthur had been so agonizingly close, too close for his own good. He had suspected Harding, had meticulously documented his suspicious movements, his clandestine contacts, his sudden, inexplicable acquisition of wealth. He had planned to confront Harding, or perhaps present his damning findings to internal affairs, perhaps even the very night he vanished, after his fateful meeting with Silas Thorne. It seemed Harding had gotten to him first, silenced him before he could speak. Silas's convenient overdose was now seen for what it truly was, a calculated murder, a professional cleanup operation designed to sever the last link to Arthur. Armed with Arthur's remarkably preserved journal, the BPD, now with a new generation of sharp, dedicated investigators like Alina Ramirez at the helm, launched a new, discreet, and intensely focused investigation. They used Arthur's notes as an unerring roadmap, connecting dots that had remained frustratingly invisible for 12 long years. Harding, caught entirely off guard by the resurrection of a ghost from his past, initially denied everything with practiced ease. But the evidence, painstakingly collected by Arthur in his final days and miraculously preserved by fate, was overwhelming. New financial records, shell corporations, meticulously cross-referenced with Arthur's detailed observations, painted an irrefutable, damning picture of corruption, large-scale drug dealing, and premeditated murder. Captain Harding was arrested in his office, his face a mask of initial disbelief, then cold, murderous fury. The story exploded in the local and national media, a far bigger sensation than Arthur's initial, mysterious disappearance. Corrupt cop murders fellow detective, buries him for 12 years. The Baltimore community, long weary of urban crime and police scandals, was gripped by a powerful mixture of shock, outrage, and a profound sense of vindication for Arthur, a quiet hero finally brought to light. For Sarah, Emily, and Daniel, the horrifying discovery brought a complicated, bitter blend of immense relief and renewed, searing pain. The closure was immense. Arthur was found, and the monster responsible was identified, his name exposed. But the reopening of old, festering wounds, the vivid reliving of those agonizing 12 years of uncertainty and grief, was almost unbearable. They grieved again, but this time with an understanding, a coherent narrative, a terrible, undeniable truth. Arthur had not simply vanished into thin air. He had been brutally silenced because he was a good, honest detective, too dedicated for his own good, too close to the truth. His immense sacrifice, hidden for so long beneath layers of earth and deception, had finally brought a measure of justice, not just for him, but for all the countless lives the corrupt drug ring had ruthlessly destroyed. The rusted industrial drum, a macabre time capsule, became a potent symbol of a city's buried secrets, its unacknowledged corruption. Arthur Pendelton's journal, his final, defiant act of courage, was an enduring testament to his unwavering commitment to justice, a powerful voice from the grave exposing the rot that had festered silently within the city's underbelly for far too long. His memory, once shrouded in impenetrable mystery and whispered suspicions, was finally honored with the brutal, liberating truth. Baltimore breathed a collective, somber sigh, knowing that even after 12 agonizing years, some truths, no matter how deeply buried, refused to stay silent.